Hey everyone, welcome to my full spoiler review of The Substance. This movie came out on September 20th and is touted as a body horror the likes of Cronenberg, and I would definitely have to agree with that. So, first off, I just wanted to say that I really loved this movie. I am a fan of horror, I am a fan of body horror. It is a very disgusting movie, I will say that, but it is all in good fun. But this particular movie also is a bit of a dark comedy, so Dennis Quaid's character in this movie is fantastic. So anyway, it's been a very long time, I feel like, since we've gotten a unique horror film that is artfully done and isn't some random cryptid or cult or anything like that and will actually make you think, because this movie's themes are not subtle. So this story follows Demi Moore's character, whose name is Elizabeth Sparkle. She navigates aging in Hollywood. So I went into this movie really only knowing two facts. First, it's a horror about a black market drug, and then it's one of Demi Moore's best performances. So if you're interested in this movie, I highly recommend that you save this review and spoiler video for later and go watch the movie first, or you'll do yourself a huge disservice. So don't worry, this video will be here, provided that I don't get hit with any copyright claims or anything like that, but this will be here when you get back. So you can watch the trailer with its full audio if you like, but if you don't, that would be even better. So it goes without saying that this is a horror, so if you don't like horror, just don't watch it. And if you won't watch it, feel free to watch this video. So anyway, with that out of the way, spoilers ahead. This is a full synopsis of the movie, The Substance. All right, so the movie opens up with someone injecting a raw egg yolk with a green solution. After a few seconds, the egg yolk divides, creating a second yolk along with the first, swimming in the same whites. Then it cuts to the creation of a star on the Walk of Fame for Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle. You don't really know that's her character at first. It's just you see Elizabeth Sparkle, they're creating the star. So it's the fresh concrete pour and the care that is taken when putting it together and all that. And then you see years following and the abuse that happens on it, people walking on it, people spilling on it, whatever, and the weather. And so it gets cracked, which, right out the gate, it's just this movie's theme is right there in your face. And I actually love that. So Elizabeth Sparkle is a famous Hollywood fitness personality, kind of the likes of Jane Fonda-ish. And she has a TV show similar to like what was in the 80s. So she had the leg warmers and everything. After a recording session, she runs to the bathroom but finds that the girls' room is out of service, so she runs into the men's. While in the stall, Dennis Quaid's character, Harvey, like I said, it's not subtle, he bursts in while on the phone with somebody talking about how old and used up Elizabeth has become and needs to be replaced. So she hears the whole exchange in secret, but she did not see him not wash his hands, which is disgusting. Later on, the two of them are at a dinner where the most misophonic sounds to assault the ears happens. There are close-ups of Harvey eating shrimp with this cream sauce. It's gross, but it's completely on point. It was, just as a side note, I thought it was kind of interesting to see the contrast between how disgusting he was being while telling Elizabeth that she's used up and she's just sitting across from him looking stunning, and he is just gross with his brown teeth and his cream sauce and his absurd amount of shrimp. But anyway, so while these shots are technically gross, the film is actually shot in such an artistic and memorable way. So shout out to the director who used a lot of color and sound to really emphasize just the memory of this movie. So anyway, as Elizabeth drives home, she's distracted by one of her billboards being torn off. It's right over the face, of course. So as she's distracted, she's struck by another car. And by a miracle, she makes it out completely unscathed, and the doctor tells her she is good to go. So as he tries to tell her happy birthday, she begins to cry, so he gets uncomfortable and leaves the room. Now there's a male nurse in there that stays behind and wants to check up on her a little bit more, and so he starts feeling her spine, which is kind of weird, and tells her that she'd be a good candidate. So she also kind of is feeling weird about it, but the camera pans down to this bright red birthmark on his wrist, which clearly is going to mean something, but she notices that and then ends up leaving the hospital. So I will say, I can't remember if this happens when she leaves either the set or the hospital, but she ends up running into an old friend who was in class with her in high school. He tells her that she's still the most beautiful woman on the planet and gives her his phone number, which ends up falling into a puddle of dirty water. And, just the sounds and the colors and just the emphasis on dirt is interesting in this film. But anyway, so when she's at home, there's a large bouquet of roses with a note that tells her, "You were great." Emphasis on were. And she feels around in her pocket and she finds this thumb drive with The Substance labeled on it. So she sticks it in her computer, plays the video, and it goes through a pitch asking the viewer, like, have you ever wanted a better, more perfect version of yourself? And, there's a demonstration with like two little balls of clay that kind of look like the egg from the beginning. So they're yellow balls of clay. One is a little bit lumpy. One is like perfectly round. And The narrator ends the video by reminding the viewer that to remember that you're still the same person, and then claps the two yellow balls together. So she waffles on that a little bit. She throws the thumb drive away, and then later on she decides to pull it out of the trash can and then call and request the substance. So the person that answers the line is just, very to the point, just yes. And so she's kind of like being polite, saying like, I'd like to order. And so, they know how this goes. So anyway, she requests the order, and she is sent a card with the number 503 on it in the mail. So the directions tell her to go to this address in an alley. So she goes to this alley, and it's like filthy, dirty. It looks like, a crack haven. It's sketchy, full of trash and graffiti, but there's a small card reader on the wall that she uses her little 503 across. It has the logo for the substance on it. It looks like two yellow D's side by side, which kind of is like a split sphere that's kind of turned. So anyway, an aluminum door scrolls up like a garage door, but it doesn't go all the way. So she has to duck under it to get inside. And the hallway in there is just as filthy and gross. And then as she walks to the very end, there's this pristine white room with just a handful of lockers, and one of which is labeled 503. So she uses her little key card, and it opens the door, and she gets her package and goes home. So inside the box, and this was really interesting how it was packaged. Inside the box, there's 4 vacuum sealed bags and large cards with simple instructions on it. The first card just says activate once, and the zip pack that goes with that is the green substance. 2 is stabilize daily. It's just like an empty medical device, and she's not really sure what it means. 3 says switch every 7 days without exception, and it's like a tubing with like a needle attached. And then number 4, the fourth card just says, remember, you are one. So she goes to the bathroom and stands kind of watching herself in the mirror for a little while before finally going through and extracting the activator. So, that sickly green substance. So it's very clear on the label, and the video pans several times to this to discard after use. So it's like a one-time use only. She injects herself with this, and just for needle cringe people, just fair warning, this one is like a close-up shot of the needle poking the skin. So after she does that, she starts convulsing very violently on the floor and just looks like she's in utter pain. So this is the point in the movie when like the wild body horror starts to happen. Trust me, this isn't like it, but this is just when it starts. So a lot of interesting visual effects happen here, and you see that this substance is creating a clone of her from within her, and it bursts from her back. So the cover that you see for the movie, that's like her, what's happening there. So Margaret Qualley's character comes into play here, and she, like I said, she bursts from Elizabeth's back, and Elizabeth ends up passing out on the floor. So the clone comes out, she's kind of confused, and she stitches up Elizabeth's back. But again, this is more needles and skin and sound effects. So there's some very prolonged nude shots from here on out while she, first of all, examines herself in the mirror, and then also later on. But the clone, she leaves Elizabeth on the bathroom floor, and there's a slow drip of a week's worth of like milky looking food substance that it like each day has like its own pocket, and it just kind of, feeds Elizabeth sitting, like lying there on the floor. The stabilize every day is the spinal tap. So she has to do a spinal tap on Elizabeth and extracts 7 days worth of the fluid, and she has to inject it every day. And she realizes this shortly after she like came to be, because as she's walking around looking at herself, all of a sudden she starts getting this like piercing headache, and her nose starts to bleed, and then she hurries to get the spinal fluid. So anyway, once she stabilizes herself and starts feeling better, she declares her name to be Sue. So some people speculate that Sue is kind of an anagram for use and kind of an allegory for drug use, which, I'll go with it. Seems to fit. So anyway, Sue, she finds an ad in the paper. So I also want to interject here. So she finds an ad in the paper. Elizabeth's show was like an 80s workout. I thought this was taking place in the 80s, but it's not, because people have smartphones. But then again, that's the whole fantasy of this thing anyway. But anyway, she finds an ad in the paper for the role to replace Elizabeth and immediately applies, and she gets the part because it's her. So after she gets the part, I swear, it's like a very long fever dream of twerking, air humping, and like undulating in the name of exercise. There's a lot of close-up shots, and you see like practically everything. And I'm talking like not just boobs. I'm talking like you see a lot. And it started to get a little uncomfortable. I was seeing this in the theater. But there's just a lot of it, and it's not subtle. So it's just telling you about, the whole beauty in Hollywood thing, which I'm sure you're smart, you and understand that. So anyway, the rules are for the women to switch every 7 days. So Sue is having a great time, doing her thing, and she's meeting boys and, whatever. She's just loving her life. And so one particular day, she takes an extra day from Elizabeth. So she takes one of the used cartridges for the spinal fluid and extracts a little bit more. And she notices more and more that the spot that she's putting the needle in to get the spinal fluid is getting infected and gross and, just more body horror grossness. But anyway, so she takes that extra day, and when Elizabeth wakes up, she realizes that her finger is like really super old and like liver spotted and just really disgusting. So she's flustered and calls the whole black market thing. And the guy on the other line, she's telling him like there's been misuse of the substance, and the man is just basically telling her suck it up, and what has been taken cannot be returned. So that was like a really important part. So basically she's going to have that old finger forever. There's nothing she can do about it. So she's pretty mad about this and decides to go out for once, and she hadn't been really going out, so she did decide to go out. She went for like a coffee at this cafe, and she sees an old man across from her who just starts talking to her and starts saying some really weird things about, only something somebody who uses the substance would know about. And then she recognizes the bright red birthmark on his wrist, which happened to be that male nurse that gave her the video in the first place. So he just keeps asking her if she's taken more time from you. And then as Elizabeth is in her mind swimming around, he's telling her that she still matters and she's still important and all this stuff. And it was a really sad scene, to be honest, because, she does still matter. And it is sad because her life is being taken over by this clone. So anyway, when she gets home, she finds the phone number that old friend she ran into that it fell in the dirty water. She decides to call him and try to meet up with him. So he's really excited for this. And so she tries to get ready, and she's like covering up the parts of her that she doesn't really like. And she just spends a lot of time in front of the mirror. And ultimately, she ends up standing him up because she can't even look at herself in the mirror without comparing herself to the huge billboard of Sue that's just like right outside of her window. So this is despite the fact that the man told her that he still finds her the most beautiful woman in the world. So it was a kind of a sad scene for me to see that, because he was trying to reach out to her and she was just kind of self-loathing, and it's just really sad because she is beautiful. Demi Moore's in her 60s. She just looks amazing. But anyway, so she spends her 7 days being a couch potato. So she's just kind of relegated to like, I'm no good. So she just like eats and watches TV. So when Sue wakes up and sees like the mess all the time, she gets frustrated. So she ends up taking more and more time from Elizabeth. And because she keeps taking more and more time from her, it's like aging her more. So she ends up with like a really aged leg, and, it just keeps going. So it gets to a point where she starts to resemble an 80-year-old. Her hair is really gray. It's wild and wiry, and she's just kind of like going insane. So she's infuriated, which one night she ends up trashing the house with like cooking and stuff. She had this like cookbook that Harvey gave her, which was kind of like an afterthought. And she decided to, it was kind of a funny scene because she's sitting there watching Sue give an interview, and everything she says, she's just like, ee, oh yay, hee, and then she's like splattering eggs all over the place, and just being really, really destructive. But anyway, so she trashes the house, and she keeps calling the owner of the substance, and the voice on the other end just keeps reminding her that there is no you and there is no her, and that they are one and the same. So she just has to remember that. So when Sue wakes up, she sees the horrid mess that Elizabeth made, and she gets so mad. She withdraws so much spinal fluid from her that it lasts her for 3 months. So during this whole time, this 3-month time period, she's really making a name for herself in the whole fitness, her television show. She ends up getting a spot to host the New Year's Eve event. She gets a boyfriend, and she completely loses track of time. So the event is rolling up. So this New Year's event, and she needs more of the fluid, but she like the last bit comes out and it's all tainted and gross. And so she calls the substance guy to complain. And first of all, he tells her the same thing he told Elizabeth, which is you guys are the same. And that in order to get more of the stability fluid, she has to let Elizabeth regenerate it. So she has to wake her up. So another interesting commentary between this is that somebody compared this to like a mother-daughter relationship, but to me, it's almost like the same person is just at war with herself. So there was the young, pretty version of herself that's having all the good times and all the attention. And then there's her, which she doesn't value and doesn't find important. And then, they're just getting mad at each other and they're starting to resent each other. So anyway, Sue doesn't have enough of this fluid, so she does wake up Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, having lost so much of that time, she's like literally a hag. She's hunched over, has like a humpback. She's completely aged, has no hair. She calls the substance number and is so mad, she requests termination. And the man on the other end is saying, "Are you sure?" And she's just like, yes, because what has been taken cannot be returned to her. But she still agrees she wants to do the termination. So she goes into her locker and picks up the package, which all it is a big syringe full of dark, like black liquid. So she begins to inject it into Sue as she's lying there unconscious. But this is a part I don't really understand very much, but I kind of get it. She stops midway, wanting to save like the part of her that everyone still loves, which is also very, very sad. And she has this utter regret and starts to try to bring her back. So she's doing CPR on her, but the CPR isn't working and blood is like coming out of her face and all that. So she ends up taking the switching tubing that they use to switch every 7 days, and she ends up stabbing it directly into her heart. And so for whatever reason, it caused them both to be awake together. And so Sue, she wakes up, sees Elizabeth standing over her, and then looks over and sees the syringe for the termination. So Sue gets really mad at that, and she attacks Elizabeth. There's this really long fight between them, very, very violent fight. They're, really going after each other, but Sue ultimately wins the fight. She kicks Elizabeth to death, and there is so much blood. It's just, at this point, it kind of reminds me of like Quentin Tarantino, where like everybody eats so much salt, the blood just flies everywhere. It's kind of one of those things. It's just all over. So anyway, she doesn't seem to care. So she kills Elizabeth, and she's lying there dead on the floor, and she just goes and gets ready for her event, and she puts on her little fancy blue dress, and she goes to the event, and she is hobnobbing with everybody. Harvey is like doting on her and everything, but then all of a sudden she starts like gagging. So she runs to the bathroom and she starts losing her teeth. Like they're coming out like really fast. And so because she cannot live without Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is dead on the floor because she killed her. So in a panic, Sue runs back to the house, and she wants to create a better version of herself. So she goes to that bathroom and grabs the expired activator and it, zooms in on the label again. She takes the expired activator, and this is probably a 4-month-old activator at this point, and she injects herself with it. So then she, this is kind of the point where it starts to get like really wildly unhinged. There's a lot of really cool visuals, like the, eyeballs are starting to like duplicate themselves in her head and all that stuff. But anyway, so like with Elizabeth, this cologne just bursts out of her back, and you don't see what it is right away, but there are some shots that kind of give you a hint at first, and it's just this like Cronenberg nightmare. So there's this episode of Rick and Morty, which if you've ever seen that with the love potion and everybody starts like turning into this like massive flesh, that's pretty much what it looks like. And they call it the Elisa Sue monstrosity, and it's a creeping mess of just like random body parts. There's eyeballs all over, like on the shoulder, like everywhere, barely like strings of hair. And there's a copy of Elizabeth's face like screaming on its back. It's not like really screaming. It's just got its mouth wide open, and it's just going like on its back. So anyway, this thing gets the blue dress back on, is about ready to go back to this event and, do her thing. And she tries to curl the hair that she has on her head, but it just like burns this little tiny, like fragile piece of hair off. But she keeps on going. But anyway, this big picture that Elizabeth had in her living room, she took it down and tore the face out of it and like pasted it to her own face and put lipstick on the paper lips of Elizabeth's face. It was really interesting. But anyway, she goes back to this event, and it's there's like boobs poking out all over the dress because it doesn't fit right. And this thing is just like I said, a mess of body parts. So of course, if we're talking about the theme of the movie, which is, the beauty in Hollywood and everybody looking at like, the woman's figure, and there's just boobs everywhere, but it's just a horror. Like it's a nightmare. So these are not pleasant boobs to look at. But anyway, so it goes back to this event, and when it arrives, it gets on stage pleading with the crowd that it's still her, as they're just like watching her in awe, like with this like what is that on stage kind of look on their face. And as she's talking, this is like the craziest part. A part of her body vomits up a boob. Like it's like looks like a balloon on a string, and it just comes out of a part of her body, like her arm or something like that, but it's like it like vomits. So after this happens, a member of the crowd screams, and like everyone starts going into a panic, and this man goes up and attacks her and like hits her with a bludgeon, and it just like explodes her top half, but then it just quickly regenerates, and then like blood is just spraying all over the crowd like a fire hose. Again, like Quentin Tarantino's like high blood pressure blood hose just going into the crowd, and everybody is screaming. The monster rushes outside when all this is happening, and then it eventually just disintegrates onto the sidewalk. And the face of Elizabeth that was screaming on the back kind of has these like weird fleshy like tentacles that it's like wiggling on, and like kind of squirms its way to the star on that Walk of Fame. And it lands on that star looking up at the sky, and it kind of smiles a little bit. And then the face also just melts away. And the next day, a street sweeper comes by and just cleans it up. And so it's it's really sad to see because like a whole life just, I don't know, reduced to nothing basically. And, just, I don't know. It was a very interesting commentary on, the double standards in Hollywood and beauty and all that stuff. But anyway, so that's The Substance. I left some stuff out, I'm sure, because it was like an acid trip for real. It was weird, it was wild, and it was very artful. So, the movie is about 2.5 hours long, and I did not feel like it was 2.5 hours. So if you have not seen the movie, but you chose to listen to this anyway, I still recommend that you go and see it, especially if you're not squeamish and if you like horror. Definitely go give it a watch. And it's definitely an experience in the theater. So catch it before it goes away. I highly recommend that. Well, that's my full synopsis spoiler review of The Substance. I really liked it, and I think you will too if you like horror and dark comedies. And Dennis Quaid is just awesome. So anyway, that would be it for today. If you liked this, feel free to give me a like. If you didn't like it, go ahead and hit the thumbs down. It's fine either way. Leave me a comment and a subscribe if you're interested in more from this channel. And if you'd like, also sign up for my newsletter. You can see the whole written version of this review on my Substack. And I will catch you in the next one. Later.
Pretty girls should always smile.